Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and this week our guest is Katy Merrifield. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So this week's guest on Elected is Katy Merrifield. Katy served as the Executive Director of the BC Liberal Party and Director of Communications to former BC Premier Christy Clark. She also served as Chief of Staff to the Minister of Health, the Minister of Jobs, Tourism and Skills Training, formerly to insiders known as the Minister of JTSI at one point, I think, but maybe it's now JTST. Anyways, it's all redundant because it no longer exists in BC. Most recently, Katy served as Executive Director of Communications to Alberta Party Premier Jason Kenney. She's currently a Vice President at Wellington Advocacy, where she leads the West Coast practice. And she appears on the podcast Political Capital, hosted by BC journalist Rob Shaw, along with Gillian Oliver from the BC Greens and McLean Kay from the Orca. Katy, welcome to Elected.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. Huge fan of yours.
Thanks. And I should just say, because it might, at some point, we're going to maybe potentially reference things that we've talked about before. And Katy and I actually tried to record this podcast last week. And unfortunately, the fire alarm in her building went off for a really long time. And so we are giving it a second go without the fire alarm.
The show must go on. We powered through, and I didn't die in a fiery hellscape. So bonus.
Yes, your apartment still looks lovely.
Thanks.
Yeah, not scorched. So maybe we should start off because people may not know that we actually know each other, and we used to work together, and so we have a relationship going back quite a long time. So we used to work in the BC legislature together when we were both. We both started in caucus research, right?
The best job I ever had.
Yeah.
I loved that job.
Yeah. It was it was the best. It was the best. Best people, coolest office with no windows, no ventilation, longest hours, most rewarding job, very intense, and highly rewarding. What, for someone who doesn't know what happens in caucus research, at least the caucus research that we worked in, how do you describe it?
So my role in caucus research was fun for a variety of reasons that Sarah outlined, but my job specifically was the lead opposition coordinator. So I would keep tabs on the leader of the opposition, as well as any of their angles, narratives, hot takes, errors that evolved over time. And it was my job to monitor and track that, and then to come up with potential angles for question period, for advertising campaigns, anything that could make the government look good and the opposition look bad. That was really my bailiwick. And I really enjoyed that job. And I know, Sarah, you did too. And I guess it speaks to our flawed characters that we enjoy sitting in a basement for 12 hours at a time with headphones, two computers, and you basically wouldn't talk to anyone all day. No. Actually, I don't know about you. I would just correspond by email through email. Yeah.
Yeah. And even with people who are sitting literally 2 feet away from you. Yes. We are special people, aren't we?
Yeah, but it's fun. You are kind of the unsung hero at times. Your work,
no one knows it happens.
Yeah, exactly. You're anonymous, but you feed really viable intel up to government staff, etc. That is useful for them in QP. And so when one of your lines is read out that you came up with, or one of your
doesn't it feel good?
Very heartwarming. Yeah,
it feels so good. It's
I liked that job. Sorry, I liked that job so much. They actually wanted to bring me onto the government side at one point, and I turned a promotion down because I felt like the work I was doing was really important.
It is. Yeah, I think so before there's any potential outrage in understanding how caucus is different than government, and every party has a caucus. And backbench MLAs well, every government member is a part of a caucus. Um,
Mhm.
Caucus specifically works with backbench MLAs who aren't in cabinet. But every party does this: NDP, Greens, federally and provincially, just before anyone thinks that this is, untoward in any way.
Yeah.
Everyone has this structure. Everyone does this. This is not
Hmm.
new. This is not specific to
Definitely.
any one party.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really miss team research. And I think that anyone who works in research, you develop a special connection around the work that you do.
Absolutely. And I would argue that's really where you hone your political skills as well.
100%.
Yeah, because you don't interact with the bureaucracy. You're not responsible for developing public policy. And of course, all of this is really important. What
Mm-hmm.
you are responsible for is identifying ways to make your government look good and the opposition to look bad. And so that requires a little political finessing over time. I think that really helps hone that particular skill set.
It does. And I think for those who, like, I'm going to say you and me, who can see
Hmm.
both sides of those things, in that we can see the very partisan aspects of it, but we can also see um, the government side of those things,
Yeah,
is a lens that you can develop through that work as well, which is ultimately beneficial in anything that you go on to do in life, because you're
exactly.
constantly looking at things and analyzing them and not just reading them for what they are.
That is an excellent summation.
Well, thank you. Um, so yeah, so we go back a long time, and I left in 2012. I moved to Alberta. You stayed in the beautiful province of BC, and then we went through, there was a lot of like tumultuous times in BC politics through those years.
Hmm. Hmm.
You ended up working for Christy Clark, who became
I
premier.
did.
What did you do for Christy, and how did that happen?
Yeah. So after the 2013 election, I did come over to the government side and served as ministerial assistant and chief of staff in a number of files. Towards the end of 2015, I was actually planning to leave government. I wanted to move back to Vancouver. I felt personally that perhaps I had hit my peak in terms of what I could offer to the government, and it was, looking for a change. So I secured a private sector opportunity and was about to announce that to the premier's office, and then lo and behold, I found out they actually, Christy wanted me in her office, which I was not expecting at all at the time. And anyways, after some soul searching and a little bit of internal debate, I took that job and went to work as her director of communications. So I had a boss. I was kind of mid-level in her office. I handled corporate communications, meaning I was responsible for, tracking and strategically placing all of the government announcements on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. Also had oversight with regards to her communications products, and then I also stick handled the overdose file from her office in conjunction with public health officials and the Minister of Health and his staff. In terms of working for her, man, like Christy is unmatched. I loved working for her. She is an exceptional communicator. We
Mm-hmm.
know she is a formidable campaigner. And she's a true believer in the power of women in politics. She managed to have near gender parity amongst her senior administration and amongst her ministers without imposing quotas at any time. And so she, even when I didn't believe in myself, which was very frequent at that time, she really believed in me and she pushed me. And I'm eternally grateful that I got to serve in her office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think we currently have different positions on carrot and stick options available to create more opportunities and gender parity in politics. I used to be of the mind that they just weren't necessary. And now,
Mm-hmm.
years out of politics, I've I've changed my mind, and I actually now think that they are what we need in order to see that change, because it just is too slow otherwise. Do you have you evolved in the same way? Or are you still of the mind that it just happens?
I'm not in favor of quotas. I never have been. In fact,
Yeah.
I think one of my first letters to the editor when I was like a first year university student was lambasting the NDP's decision to impose quotas prior to the 2009 election. So nerd for life over here. So yeah, I'm not into quotas, but I do think that you need fair and adequate representation, and I think that you should, embrace that diversity through merit. There are there are just as many talented women as there are men, and so I think that you can adequately hire a balanced workplace without the use of quotas, but always having that mind to equitable distribution of views on your team.
I
What
think
about you?
unless you recognize the systemic barriers to greater gender and diversity in politics, then I think that's when I think the stick is needed. Because if you don't have people who recognize those barriers and that then you do end up with offices and teams that are still overwhelmingly white and male. And that's just something I'm really tired of.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important that you have senior officials with that diversity inclusion mindset. Kim Hackstead, for example, she was the deputy chief of staff under Christy for a period of time, and I remember having a conversation with her way early on, before this topic was as trendy and prevalent as it is now. And she said, I believe in having a workplace and a team that is reflective of the BC landscape, and so that means we are going to ensure that we have a balanced approach in terms of male, female, ethnicities, different political viewpoints, etc. So Kim was a really big leader in that mindset prior to it being almost a near requirement in today's day and age. So I'm grateful to Kim as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely takes those people to have that awareness. I think the biggest problem is that when there are people who just don't think it's a real thing, which is unfortunately very true. And yeah, so there's a lot of factors that go into it, but I think that the fundamental is that even if we don't agree on it, obviously, and have the same thoughts on it, but we both agree that there need to be more women and more diversity in politics. Right. And I think that's something that I've taken flack for I know it's something I've taken flack for in the past. And it's like, well, how can you, as with my work with Madam Premier, how can you, potentially give a platform to someone who is, who has different views? And it's, well, yes, I understand that they have different views, as long as they're not, extremist or hate or, spewing anti-science, just bullshit, to be honest. I think that silence, there's also a very dangerous part of just not recognizing that there's different ways to get to the same place. And if we don't create that opportunity for people to get there, then that's also very harmful.
Yeah, I would not disagree with that.
So there are ways to have thoughtful conversations about it. It's unfortunate. I think a lot of this happens on Twitter, is that people just have a very specific viewpoint, and there's just not a lot of room to have thoughtful conversations on it.
Oh, I'm sure we could talk the entire.
That's like a whole episode, right?
About Twitter, yeah. But you're right. We are moving. I don't like when we reach this kind of peak of polarization where one idea is right and one idea is wrong in the eyes of the beholder. And I've always found, in my life, I always want to have a diverse array of friends from the left to the right, so that I feel when I adopt a particular stance on an issue that I can come at it from a place that's well informed. I think that more folks would benefit from kind of opening up their political horizons with different viewpoints. I think the world would be a better place.
I completely agree. And yeah, I think there's danger when you only surround yourself with people who share the same point of view. Yeah. Because then you literally live in a bubble, and it makes it hard to have disagreements, and disagreements are actually like, I enjoy evolving. You might too, you might do this too, but I am not the same person I was at 20 or 18, and I'm really thankful for that, because I am
me too.
Right, for a variety of reasons, some of which we're definitely not going to talk about, but like more thoughtful, more educated, more empathetic, more understanding, more aware, and those are good things. So evolving on an issue is, I don't think that's not a bad thing. And a lot of people find fault in that. They're like, well, you're not allowed to change your mind. No, we want, especially politicians, we want them to potentially change their minds.
We're seeing that a little bit play out in British Columbia here, with Kevin Falcon just entering the leadership reins. Right. There are some folks who are just willfully ignorant to the idea that somebody's values, beliefs, and principles can evolve over a decade. And so I'm glad that Kevin is going to be strong, outlining the various ways that he's adapted as a result of, having two young daughters. My perspective on addiction has shifted demonstrably over the years. Like back 10, 15 years ago, I had no patience and a lot of disrespect for people who were struggling based on, some issues that had happened in my family. It was a reaction to that. And then over time, learning so much more about the issue, working on the overdose file in Christy's office, experiencing some personal challenges myself, like my beliefs have fundamentally altered.
Yeah, mine too. I used to have some very, I was very uneducated, for example, on the atrocities committed to this day, unfortunately, against Canada's Indigenous populations. And thankfully I know different now, because I understand, because I literally wasn't given that opportunity to understand what had happened. And I was a product of my environment, and we evolve, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you put into the context of Kevin Falcon, because no one is who they were 10 years ago. Like,
no.
And if you are, then maybe give some thought to
adapting
to something else. Okay, back to politics. More politics, or different politics. You are the first and youngest woman in BC to run a leadership campaign and win, which is amazing. You ran Andrew Wilkinson's campaign for leader of the BC Liberal Party. And he's no longer leader, but and now obviously you had already just mentioned that Kevin Falcon is running for leadership along with Gavin Dew, Ellis Ross. I read in an article that Michael Lee, the MLA, is running, but I haven't seen, has he actually announced?
He had a 6-second teaser video called Ready to Run that was released on the same day that Kevin announced.
Bad timing.
Well, I think it was purpose to give, I think I know the team's strategy. They wanted to, try and disrupt the launch in any way they could of the perceived front runner. So tactically it makes sense. I'm a little bit confused, because typically if you have a teaser like that, the next day you produce something else, the next day something else, and then maybe a launch. Like, it's kind of part of a strat comms plan. I haven't seen anything since that video. So I anticipate perhaps we'll see a formal launch in the next couple of weeks or so, but I think that was a deliberate shot against the Kevin campaign.
Interesting.
So yes, I ran Andrew's leadership campaign. What can I tell you about that?
What would you like to tell me about that? What was the experience like? Can you give me a high and a low from that experience?
Absolutely. So just to give some context, I talked about my time in Christy's office, and again, like, she is the bee's knees in my mind, and it was such an honor to serve her. But my time in that office, I wasn't as confident and as strong as I am now. My imposter syndrome when I worked for Christy really peaked. I was in an office with some very talented, big personalities, and I did too much comparison, like comparing my insides to their outsides. And I made myself feel really small. I didn't feel like I was good enough. And as a result, I kind of shied away from giving my opinion on a number of issues. I was just a little gun shy, very hesitant. And so I was, when we lost the election, I was really mad, and I was really mad at myself.
That's a caveat that there's needs to be an asterisk there, because
but when we won, but then we're removed from government.
Yes.
Is that the caveat you're looking for?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Let's just be clear on that point, because
yes, we did.
For the poly nerds in the audience, it wasn't a clear cut election.
Very true. No,
right?
she was reelected twice. But anyways, so my imposter syndrome really peaked in my time in her office. And after the election, I was really pissed at myself. I felt like I had not reached my potential. I felt like I had personally let her down. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying like the election losses on my shoulders, I'm not that powerful by any stretch, but I felt something. And what was important, and I think this is a lesson that I can share with folks, like if you're angry, if you're mad at yourself, if you're engaging any kind of self-loathing over job performance or really anything, like channel that into something positive and productive. And the way that I channeled that was to take on the role as campaign director, something I had never done before, for Andrew, because I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. And you know, obviously the BC Liberal Party is my family. I've been part of that organization since I was in university. So I wanted to have a positive impact on my party, mm-hmm. but I needed to give myself that confidence back, and it really helped. It was it's very challenging, a 6-month leadership race. Like I don't know how these guys are going to do it with the vote in February. 6 months is very long, and it's arduous, and it's challenging. And you're fighting your friends. Like mm-hmm. in terms of a low, you are fighting your friends. If you have been part of a political entity for a long time, and then you develop,
everyone.
Race, yeah, everyone has to pick a side, and you have to engage. So mm-hmm. you know, some bombs were thrown, and
who else led campaigns during that leadership race?
For Michael Lee, it was Kareem Allah and Mark Marison were heavily involved. So was Gavin. For Diane Watts, it was Norm Stowe, and Trevor Halford was really engaged in that campaign, as well as Brad Zubik. Todd Stone had Don Stickney and Stephen Smart, and then Sam Sullivan, Derek Robertson. Who am I missing? Am I missing anyone?
I'm not sure. I don't think so.
Oh, Mike DeYoung. DeYoung had Brian Menzies and Stephen Carter.
Right. Of course.
Those is only lady.
The Alberta connection. Yeah, you were literally the only woman, and you won. So
I had a really.
You had a team. Obviously, it wasn't. Yeah, can you imagine running a campaign only by yourself?
Oh my God, it's impossible. It would be, and that's politics is a team sport. You got to back your team always. It's not about you. It is about what you are fighting for, and it is about working collaboratively in a team. And I believe that wholeheartedly, which is why the high for that campaign for me, aside mm-hmm. from obviously winning, was that I got to work with folks who were brilliant, but more importantly, folks that I care about and I trust. Mm-hmm. So it was really, you know, moving together as a family affair for that 6 months.
That was the high. What was the low? Oh, the bombs from having to work with people, you know.
You're attacking your friends.
That is hard.
But it's politics.
It is politics.
When you're in a campaign scenario, like drop the gloves.
Yeah.
If you're mature, and if you've if you're a longtime political actor, you can recognize that that's the game part. Mm-hmm. And so throw the gloves off when you're in the arena, and then, you know, treat each other with respect outside of it.
And then once the game is over and the outcome has been decided, then you're all on the same team.
Yes.
Which leads us into the perfect segue in talking about your transition to Alberta politics. Mm-hmm. Because Alberta politics and BC politics are very, very, very different. We're only about, you're currently in Vancouver. I'm currently in Calgary. So we're about 1,100 kilometers apart from each other. But in some ways we are thousands and thousands of miles, kilometers
Yes.
apart from each other. So you tell me about your move to Alberta politics.
So I'd always been a huge Jason Kenney fan. He was the federal minister when I worked for Shirley Bond, when she was his provincial counterpart. And so I got to meet Jason Kenney a few times and really see him perform at FPT meetings, where he would just intellectually eviscerate all of his colleagues. It was really something to watch. And, you know, I thought to myself, I'd love to work for this person one day. I still wasn't expecting the call when I received it. Prior to the election, they were considering folks, you know, should they be victorious, who they could bring on in their office and who could help on the transition team. And so I received a call. I was on a plane 2 days later, met Jason Kenney, and then within a week, after some deliberation, had accepted the job and moved over there I had started working on the transition team at early April, maybe late March, and then I moved on election night to Alberta,
Edmonton.
from Vancouver to Edmonton. Yes. Very different city.
Well, I think you had it a little bit easier because I went from Victoria to Fort McMurray.
Yes.
You had better mall options than I did.
Here's what I like. I love Vancouver. Vancouver is where I'm going to be probably for the rest of my life. I love the picturesque landscape. I love the lifestyle here. I need the outdoors. I need the kind of fitness oriented mindset. That is just something that I've discovered that I need in my life. I will say though, Albertans are the kindest people on the planet. When I moved to Edmonton, every single person I met would introduce themselves, then give me a list of their favorite restaurants, and then ask if I needed a ride anywhere. And I was like, what is this? Because in Vancouver, you find out, like, if somebody's coming and saying, oh, okay, well, there's the Canada line, I'll meet you for dinner, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
People there are so good-hearted.
I would actually argue, so when I moved from Victoria to Fort McMurray, I discovered that the friendliest Canadians are actually Newfoundlanders.
Oh, maybe. I haven't met any Newfoundlanders.
No, Newfoundlanders take the cake. They are number one in terms of kindness. They are just, because there's a large population of Newfoundlanders living in Fort McMurray. And yes, it is. I had a really hard transition from moving to Victoria to Fort McMurray for a lot of like personal reasons. But the friendliness that you experience in Fort McMurray is unlike any other. That's what made landing in that community as good as it was, given my the circumstance. My dad had just died, so but anyways, that's not what this is about right now, but we're talking about Alberta politics. So you get to Alberta, you're living in Edmonton, you start working for Jason Kenney. What are some of the differences between Alberta politics and BC politics in your opinion?
Right. So in Alberta at the moment, you've got two movement parties, right? A little more ideological, which results in peak polarization in the political landscape. In British Columbia, I would argue the two main parties are kind of more brokerage coalition in nature. Everyone's always vying for the center. And as a result, there's some polarization and shots are fired on Twitter here as well, but it's really nothing compared to what I saw in Alberta. It can be very toxic. There's not a lot of goodwill between the two leading parties. And that can wear you down a little bit. I have a good friend now from the NDP, Leah, who was Notley's communications director. After a while, it's just like this polarization is exhausting and it's really toxic and I don't like it. And I wanted to have a respectful and friendly relationship with my counterpart. So we worked really hard at that. And it made life so much easier. I will just say, if you are a smart political operative who has been at this game for a while, please, you recognize that everyone is human. Everyone has feelings. Everyone has kindness. And while you may throw down in a political arena, that doesn't mean that you should disrespect each other outside of it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think there are a lot of people on Twitter in Alberta who aren't actually like they would probably describe themselves as activists online, who may be engaged in party politics to some degree, but lack that perspective. And I say that with all due respect. And it's something that I feel has significantly contributed to a very dark and negative place online where you can't have a different viewpoint. And I wish that we could find ourselves, I wish we could get out of it. And I wish we could just maybe lay down the partisanship a little bit more, and just see each other as, people who have different ideas, with certain exceptions, like, my personal deal breakers, like equality, respect and support for LGBTQ individuals, for transgender rights, so there are some things, but we just need to be a little bit more human with each other.
Yeah, you can criticize somebody's ideas, and I do that quite frequently. I'm doing that right now. Had an op-ed in the National Post and did a podcast on how I felt about some of the dissidents in the UCP caucus, and I don't regret that, and I don't take it back or anything like that. But I'm not there's a difference between criticizing somebody's ideas and who they are fundamentally as a person. Right? Yes,
there is a big difference.
I think we see too much of the latter.
Yes, and I want to talk a little bit about your National Post special, which came out yesterday, because there were two good sections that I wanted to read out, and then get your, some other thoughts from you on it. So, in the National Post article, which you wrote was yesterday, which is Thursday, May 20th. So this won't air until next week. But so we're talking about this will air in the future, but our present day is Friday, May 21st. This appeared on Thursday, May 20th. In it, you said, when you run for office, you're pledging loyalty 3 ways. First, to your constituents. Second, to the leader under whose banner you ran. And finally, to the party's principles and policies. Most party leaders choose to enforce the second and the third pledges at the expense of the first, using ironclad caucus discipline to ensure the party speaks with one voice. This ensures message discipline, which makes the leader's life easier when selling complex public policy. So
that is right.
Yes. So what do you, I mean, and you and I come from BC politics, where it was different. This was not the way of working under Gordon Campbell or Christy Clark. And caucus members were, did go out and they did sit as independents, and they were, I'm thinking about Bill Bennett, who was most commonly, he was often put on the sidelines for speaking out against cabinet and caucus. But the discipline of the party was very strong, which is
very strong.
This is the opposite what we're seeing now in Alberta. So do you think that, I mean, it's obviously Jason Kenney's choice, this is his leadership style, but do you think the BC way is better?
I don't think it's a case of one is better than the other. What I sought to do in that National Post article is clearly articulate the rationale for permitting this level of dissent, because a lot of folks are interpreting it as utter chaos. But this has been a principle that was part of the founding ethos of the UCP. And I think Kenney deserves a lot of credit for the amount of latitude that he affords these folks. I come from a different experience. In British Columbia, we knew that we had to band together, like liberals and conservatives had to stick together.
The BC Liberal Party is a coalition of federal liberals and federal conservatives. So two very different political federal ideologies brought together in one provincial party. So yes, people 100% have very different views, yet are able to work together.
Precisely. But to compare and contrast the two, the BC Liberal Party has been in existence for quite some time now.
Yes.
Gordon Campbell deserves a lot of credit for his ability to bring together Conservatives, Liberals, like Reform, Progressives, way back in the 90s. And so there's been a lot of practice with that ethos of banding together no matter what. Whereas the UCP is still new. They're about 2 years, 2-3 years old. So, that kind of attitude, I think, takes time, and it takes lessons before you kind of recognize the need of putting the team first before your own interests. And I wish that some folks over there would realize that sooner than later, because this is a government that it's a party that if they stay united, the electoral history of that province proves that they will continue to win. And so I see it as a better use of time to stick together, support the leaders, support the party, make incremental changes along the way, rather than pulling temper tantrums in the media when you don't get your way on each and every issue.
Do you think the nomination process going into the next provincial election in Alberta will change then, and that there will be a greater level of screening to potentially focus on candidates that are more of the team approach rather than the approach?
I have no window into that recruitment process.
Yeah.
I think, again, to credit the UCP and Jason Kenney in particular, they did an impressive job at candidate recruitment for a brand new party, bringing together two disparate entities who at one point hated each other. And he managed to, present a team that was diverse in gender, in age, in abilities, in ethnicities. They did a good job. I think it's more the culture of Alberta Conservatives, right? To criticize inward. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. If you just look at the history of center-right premiers in that province, you've had something like 9 premiers in 16 years or something of that extent. It's pretty significant. So I think, sure, are they going to have some scrutiny with regards to candidate recruitment? Of course, any political party, as they go into each election cycle, adapts with the lessons that they learned. But I just wonder if it's overall a culture shift that's more focused to a team mentality that needs to occur.
Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to every way. And I know that, a lot of people will say, well, I want to join a political party, but I still want to have my voice and speak out against issues. Well, when it ultimately undermines the party, and this is no matter what party it is, because also in the special that you wrote, you said, I have seen parallels drawn between the current situation and the downfall of former Premier Alison Redford, but I think a better comparison is to the government of BC in 2012. The BC Liberals were over 20 points down in the polls. The media was measuring the drapes for the NDP. Caucus leaks were frequent. An MLA defected to the now moribund BC Conservative Party, but the then Premier and her team absorbed the punches, stuck together, created an inspiring vision for the province, eviscerated the NDP opposition, and walked away from the 2013 election with an even bigger majority. It can be done. So are you hoping that the MLAs who aren't on Team Kenney, Team UCP, read that and took it to heart?
I hope so. Again, I don't think that I understand the criticism, which is lobbied at me quite frequently, that I am not from Alberta. I don't understand Alberta politics. I haven't been there. I would like to say I went out to Alberta in 2012 to campaign for Danielle Smith, who I was a huge fan of. So I have supported Alberta Conservatives for a long time now. But I do understand, you don't necessarily want somebody coming in and, professing all their wisdom and everyone has to agree with it and adapt to it immediately. I don't think that at all, but I do hope that people just have a sober second thought. Look at it's not about what is relevant today or what you need to speak your mind on today or tomorrow. Think a year from now, think 2 years from now, think 5 years from now. Everything that you do should be a little bit more strategic in nature rather than explosive and reactionary.
Mm-hmm. And this conversation is specific to, Alberta politics and what's happening in the UCP today, but it is applicable to any party and any caucus in any province.
Yes.
These are like very fundamental issues to any party and to any caucus. And I've never been elected, so I haven't sat at the caucus table and had those discussions, but I can't imagine what it would be like. But ultimately, I think there's a decision about, are you on the team or are you not on the team? And if you're not on the team, then what do you do?
And it seems, I think that after the expulsion of those two MLAs, that conversation was clearly had in caucus. I think things have calmed down considerably, and hopefully, as we look, we can see COVID. It's the end of COVID is on the horizon. Mm-hmm. Like Albertans and all Canadians are soon going to be able to get back to normal. The UCP is going to be able to get out on the road. Kenney will go to every community, shaking hands, meeting people, what he excels at, and they can put forward a really exciting vision that is like their pre-campaign vision for the next couple of years. And so I'm personally really excited for that opportunity, because I think that a bit of a refresh is needed after the exhaustion that is this pandemic. I think people are really stressed right now. I think MLAs are really stressed right now.
Yeah.
And putting this behind us and focusing on a revised vision for the future, that is going to bring calm and peace, and I think more rational thought, I hope.
I hope so, Katie, but I also think about it from the context of, once COVID is hopefully over, and we've all gotten our second shots, and we can start thinking about a vision for the Alberta of the future, and the NDP and the UCP, put forward their campaign platforms. I am not optimistic that there's going to be any kind of weapons down in terms of like on the partisan from those two sides, in terms of the fight is going to be intense and brutal, and I think Albertans have gotten lost in the conversation, and it's just become so partisan and so political here that we need to find our way back to thoughtfully governing for all Albertans, not just the ones who get the votes. But there was also, I'm not sure if you saw it, hopefully you did, there was the Western Standard in Alberta is getting all the scoops these days, and probably will never have as many clicks right now as they do. But there was also a leak apparently out of caucus about from a rural MLA, Michaela Glasgow, about women in the UCP. And we kind of already touched on this. There are different approaches to this, but you're a conservative woman in politics, having worked in both provinces. What do you see as the future for women in politics in these two provinces, or just in general?
It's so funny because in Alberta, I'm called a liberal, and in BC, I'm called a conservative. I guess.
That's actually perfect, because you actually, like me, I'm a red Tory, or a federal liberal, or a conservative. It depends on who's saying it or how I'm defining myself on the day, right? So
yeah. I've been a member of the Conservative Party of Canada since I was old enough to have a membership. So I definitely consider myself a conservative, but in Alberta, sometimes you're not conservative enough for some of the folks there. So in terms of the future of women in politics, and I don't think it changes depending on the province that we're talking about. I think, for me, like, my prescription for success has always been, build allies, not enemies, where you can. Focus on the task at hand, focus on the work. Don't get caught up in, workplace drama or gossip, which young political staff always have a tendency to gravitate towards. And if you have a point, always say it. This is something I respect about Jason Kenney and Christy Clark. They selected their offices with purpose in mind. They wanted to have a divergent array of views so that they could make calculated decisions that take into consideration a variety of perspectives. And so, like, in Christy's office, I wasn't as confident. I learned my lesson. And in Kenny's office, I always felt heard. And I always felt welcome and encouraged to speak my mind and back it up with evidence. He did that with everyone. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of my hot tips for success. In addition, politics is still a male dominated field. We all know that. And you are going to encounter internalized sexism at every turn. And that's not limited to conservative parties or liberal parties or NDP.
It's all parties.
It's simply everywhere. Yeah. So for me, having female mentors has been something that has gotten me to where I am today. I was so fortunate to work for Christy Clark, who I said, formidable, like such a fighter, taught me to always fight for what I believed in, no matter what, and to not give a toss about what other people think of me. I worked for Mary Polak. She was my first boss in politics. I got fired from working for Harry Bloy, but we can talk about that after. But she was who I worked for after that. And she taught me the importance of having allies, not enemies, like build up your network, build up your supporters. And then Shirley Bond, who is very famous in British Columbia, like she taught me the power of work ethic, doing your homework. And again, always saying what you had to say, like leave it on the table. Don't shy away from giving your opinion. Mm-hmm. The worst thing somebody can do is disagree with it. And that takes a long time to get to. It took me a long time to feel comfortable with that.
I'm still working on that. Because I find it can make women and men, a lot of women actually, especially, very uncomfortable to be kind of to share your opinion and to lack to preface it with apologies and this is just my opinion and I really don't know what I'm talking about, and to just say things it takes people aback, and you have to become okay, in my opinion, with their how they take it, because if you're just sharing an opinion, obviously not yelling or screaming or right, you just have to do it anyways.
And that goes to what you're saying, reminds me of what Christy always says, which is a potential hurdle that women face in politics historically and also currently is that you have this choice to be nice or to be competent. You can't be both. Right. So either you're nice and then you're a big old pushover, or you're competent and you're a bitch. Yeah. And for the longest time, I wanted to be liked. And so I was sort of nice, I guess. More nice and just like subdued and quiet. Like I hate that part of me now. And now I would rather be seen as competent. Michelle Rempel Gardner tweeted something a few weeks ago, essentially saying she was giving advice, I think, to Annie Paul, who was on your show. And she said, stop being polite, stop being nice. Like inside you, there is a badass, essentially. Like let that person out. And that stuck with me. I really liked that. It's not about being rude. It's not about being like condescending. It's not about acting like an asshole. It's just recognizing that you have a point, you have an opinion, and it deserves to be left on the table and respected. And so just say it.
Yeah. My last campaign experience, I was managing a campaign, and I had a male counterpart. He had a meltdown, and I said, this just isn't on. If I had been the one to have the meltdown, and it would have been a different conversation, right? Because then it would have been, she's emotional. Oh, yeah. But he was just sharing he was just being passionate. He was
right in the same way that John Horgan. Oh, he's not sexist towards Christy Clark. He's just passionately telling her to go read a book. Like, fuck, the double standard is revolting.
Yeah, there are definite double standards, and ultimately ended up leaving that campaign and because I felt like the trust had been broken, in that I didn't feel like I had the confidence of other people in that campaign, because it was me who was undermined ultimately. The issue wasn't no longer with him. It was how I dealt with the situation, because I was speaking in the way that I am speaking exactly to you right now. That was considered to be too much.
That's so ridiculous. When was that?
That was 2017.
Oh man, that wasn't even that long ago.
Yeah, I was also 8 months pregnant.
Oh,
running a campaign. Yep. So,
well, that doesn't surprise me at all, because you're a badass. But it just the examples like that just make my blood boil, right? It shows that we have
a long ways to go.
Hills to climb. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the only way to fight back is to be in the arena and to do things that make us uncomfortable.
Well,
I do it.
I will never run a campaign again. I know that. And I am much more happy. I am in a position. This is actually like my dream position in politics, because I don't ever plan on running. I am more comfortable behind the scenes on the communication side of campaigns, and talking about strategy and different things. But now with Madam Premier, I have the absolute pleasure and the honor of advocating for issues that I fundamentally believe in a cross-partisan way, meaning that I think there are a lot of issues about women in politics that defy party membership. And now I can continue to advocate for greater representation of women and marginalized voices in politics without just from that standpoint, without having to do it within the confines of a party.
And we are so lucky that you are engaging in this important work. And I love the cross-partisanship aspect of it. And shameless plug, the clothes are fantastic. I'm wearing the Feminist AF sweater right now. Everyone should go out and buy Madam Premier. And I can't wait until your store opens.
Thanks. I'm very excited about the store. Construction, unfortunately, has not yet started yet. It is imminent. And the store actually doubles as an event space. So for example, there's a TV, which will obviously have the news on all the time, but also events like throne speeches, contentious votes, I'm talking US politics as well as international, and of course Canadian and Alberta and BC. But it's going to be a gathering place and a community hub for women to build capacity. Not only is it a store, but it's also a gathering place to learn and to educate and to grow and to build a better Calgary, a more progressive one, actually, because I think that's what we need. But I wish I could talk to you like so many. I think it's becoming a bit of a repetition. I say this to everyone who's been on Elected so far, is that I wish we could just keep on talking. But I know that you have other things to do today, and I'd like to thank you for coming on and doing a second take. We thankfully were not interrupted by your fire alarm this time.
It spared us.
Yes. And I'm just so excited to see what you do in the future, and all of your future op-eds. And I noticed on Twitter actually that there are some people, there are other podcasts that would like to have you on. So I feel like this is a bit of a coup now in terms of us talking today, because that's part of the relationship building that can happen in politics, right?
Well, you would always be my first choice regardless.
Oh, well, thank you. So I hope you keep doing whatever it is that you're doing, Katy Merrifield.
And you as well, Sarah Elder.
And Team Research.
Chamanara, right?
It is.
Did I pronounce your last name?
Chamanara, yeah. But yeah, it's still in politics. I still think it's everyone knows me as Sarah Elder, not Sarah Elder-Chamanara. But Team Research, it's been a pleasure having you on today.
Anytime, Sarah. Best of luck in all of your endeavors.
Thanks. This was Elected. Thanks for listening today. And of course, a thank you to Katy Merrifield for joining me in conversation. Next week, our guest will be Jill Promoli, a mother, an activist, an aspiring politician, with a story that you have to hear. Until next time.
Yeah.